Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, good evening. It's 7 o'clock, even though it's very daylight outside. This spring forward has me a little bit messed up, but it is 7 o'clock, and we're going to go ahead and get started with our topic Tuesday. It's a joint collaboration with Beginnings SC and SC Hands and Voices. And I am Jocelyn, the current parent president with South Carolina Hands and Voices. And we have co-presenting today Lisa Jolly, who's with Beginnings SC, and Jennifer on, who helps us, and have our wonderful interpreter, Heather. And our other co-presenter is David Washington. And so we want to be good stewards of your time. And with it being 7 o'clock, we're going to start our presentation on communication opportunities and planning. Just to give you a little bit of background, some of you probably know both of them because they are very active in South Carolina and their background. But with this presentation, they are going to be talking about different communication options and considerations for your deaf and hard of hearing children, and definitely parent empowerment or caregiver empowerment to be able to get the services and coordinated services for your kiddos. David Washington is a third generation of a deaf on his father's side, and he has a long history, including attending Gallaudet University, where he graduated. And his training has led him down to South Carolina and working for the School for the Deaf and the Blind. And he began there as a residential advisor and done different things from elementary to secondary boys. And so his primary responsibility was to teach them independent living skills. And then now he's in the capacity of the outreach department with the SE School for the Deaf and the Blind as a family trainer. So we welcome Mr. Washington in this presentation that will be co-hosted with our very own Lisa Jolly with Beginnings SC. And I hate to tell you, Lisa, it was at the AG Bill conference that I realized that you were the original person with Hitch Up in North Carolina.
Yeah, a long time ago.
That connection before. So I was like, oh, I'll have to mention that. But Lisa has a vast background too. She has a son who's hard of hearing and was originally in Charlotte, North Carolina. As I mentioned, she worked with Hitch Up. And then with working with the professionals to be able to better serve her son, she relocated to South Carolina and has served in several capacities, but she understands about parent empowerment and have attended camps like Camp Cheerio on communication options and learning. And she's a current co-president with SCAG Bell. And so we welcome both of them this evening to talk about communication opportunities and planning. So I will shut my video down and I will turn it over to you wonderful people for this presentation.
Thank you, Jocelyn. So I'm just going to start by saying that David and I, planned this topic Tuesday topic around communication opportunities and the planning for to meet those opportunities. So what we really want to do again is, as Jocelyn said, is we want to give information to parents about all of your communication opportunities. And we want you to know that nothing is set in stone ever. These are truly opportunities, and you can, decide to focus on something and then change your mind and focus on something else. But what we want to do is give you the tools to make, to understand how language is developing with these opportunities, and then make the choices. I don't even like to use the word choice. I want you to be able to look at what your family is like, look at what you desire, what your desired outcome is, and then we want you to make a plan and set some goals. So thank you. I'm going to turn it over to David. Oops, forgot. I'm supposed to do this slide too. Apologies. So one of the things at Beginnings that we really want people to know is, first of all, speech and communication and language. They're interrelated. But speech is the communication or the expression of thoughts using a spoken language. Communication is the exchange of information between two individuals who are using the same language system, and that information is exchanged by their tone of voice, by their eye contact, by their physical closeness, visual cues that they use, and their overall body language. Language is what we're talking about. A system made up of symbols, which are words represented by spoken sounds or visual gestures, and they represent everyday objects or ideas, and they all have socially shared rules. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to explain American Sign Language first. And what that is. With signing, the brain processes linguistic information through the eyes, the shape, placement, and movement of the hands, as well as facial expressions and body movements. So all that plays an important part in conveying information. And ASL does have its own syntax and grammar as well. For example, in English, we have the subject, verb, object form of sentence, right? So I went to Ireland a year ago. So that's the English way of saying that. In American Sign Language, you have time and then subject, verb, object order. So last year I went to Ireland. So that's American Sign Language. It's got its own grammar, but that's an example of one of the sentences in comparison to English. Oftentimes, like babies are learning American Sign Language. I mean, if you're signing with them, they're actually learning American Sign Language. It's not just called like a baby sign language. And beginning signers do use American Sign Language, and it is not universal. It's in the US as well as in Canada is where it's mostly used. Also, American Sign Language includes dialect, like people from different areas have different dialects, just like with language, with spoken language. Same idea. For example, when I went to Gallaudet in Washington, D.C., I grew up in the South, and I'm in South Carolina. So the sign for chicken, for example, we sign chicken here with like our three fingers out. I'm like, okay, great. All right, I'm going to go to the cafeteria at Gallaudet, and the chef asked me, what would you like to have? And so I was like, I'll have some of the chicken. And I signed chicken the way I've always signed it. And he did not know what I was talking about, even though he knew sign language. And so I thought, oh yes, I'm up north. They do not sign chicken like that. They sign it like they would bird, showing the beak. So if you go to a different area or location, oftentimes you need to just be aware that there are different dialects. So yeah, out in the South, we sign chicken one way, then in a different way it's signed up north. So you kind of have to code switch depending on where you are and depending on what people you're around communicating with. Next. Okay, conceptual signs, or the other name for it is pigeon sign English, or conceptually accurate signed English. It's a combination of American Sign Language and English spoken language. And so this is an actress here. She was just in the movie The Eternals. It's a new movie that's out. It came out last year. So anyway, it's a good movie. She's an actress in that. She was in The Walking Dead as well. Laura Ridloff is her name. I'm Ridloff, sorry. And so you can go ahead and start the video.
Actually, American Sign Language has its origins in France. The grammar is more similar to French than English. It has its own semantic rules, syntax. So what Josh has learned, we might call pigeon signed English. So he's learned signs, but he puts them in the order to fit the way he speaks. So it's easier for a hearing person to learn and sign in that way than to use American Sign Language. So similar to spoken.
When you communicate to Josh, do you use ASL or do you switch into Signed English.
So it depends. If he's being nice to me, then I follow English order.
If not,
But actually, I do a mix of American Sign Language and English with him because Josh really is a natural. He has picked up some nice ASL during the process. I don't know, we met a little over a year ago now, I think.
yeah,
So he can't help but learn some ASL.
Of course.
little by little by little.
So that was an example of Pidgin Sign English. I myself use Pidgin Sign English more than American Sign Language. But I do what they call code switch. So when I'm hanging out with like deaf individuals, I'll use more American Sign Language. And when I'm hanging out with more hearing individuals, I'll use PSE. Right now I'm using more PSE, not as much American Sign Language. My father is very much like, he uses American Sign Language, especially when we're speaking with each other. Okay, next slide.
Actually, American Sign Language had originally.
So hi. So I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about cued speech or cued American English. And I have been around cuers for years. My son and my family and I attended Q Camp. Gosh, probably we've missed only a few over the years. And that was where we really got to hang out with adults who used a variety of communication modes and oftentimes used several. So this is my friend Aaron Rose. He and I actually chaired Camp Cheerio one year. Gosh, I don't remember. It was a very long time ago. He's a young adult, or well, actually, he's probably in his 40s now, but at the time he was a young adult, and he's a delight to work with, and he's a very interesting man. But cued speech itself is not a language. These are cues. It is a visual and complete representation of the English language. So I use this quote from Illinois School for the Deaf, and I'm just going to read it real quick. But part of Illinois School for the Deaf's vision and mission statement reads that they are providing an accessible ASL English bilingual communication environment, that they respect all forms of communication for deaf and hard of hearing. They use cued speech to represent English visually through the air. It supports their bilingual philosophy and does not work against their use of ASL. So students at Illinois School for the Deaf are being afforded the opportunity to learn English in its primary form, which is spoken, before being asked to learn and master English in its secondary form, which is print. Cued speech is sometimes referred to as captions for your mouth, which I think is very interesting. And even though I'm sitting here telling you that, I began attending Q Camp probably about 18 years ago, maybe 19. I never took Q class. There were so many different tracks for the parents to learn when we attended camp. And of course, the kids were doing their own thing. But I just recently completed my first, 4 cued speech classes. And so at this point, I am cueing extremely slowly with a lot of errors, but I'm going to continue to practice just as you would any new language that it's not a language again, it's a cued representation of the English language, but with anything that you're learning that's new to you, you want to continue to you have to practice. So I'm going to play my video here of Aaron. He completed this video for me in 2020 when we were at the height of the pandemic, and beginning South Carolina decided to do something called virtual circle time for some of our students over the summer. And we wanted to introduce our families and these little ones to a variety of communication opportunities. So hopefully the closed captioning is going to be on. Yes.
Hey there, my name is Aaron Rose. I'm a native cuer. I grew up in Q speech. I have a cochlear implant. and currently I am the marketing and outreach coordinator for Marian Down Center and Other Artists Clinic. I also support Q College, which is an online learning program for Q speech. So here I am in the mountains of Colorado, where I love to climb and skateboard. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great ball. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again.
So Erin, one of the things that I'd asked the folks to do during that summer was to present nursery rhymes in their communication modality. So that's the reason he did the little Humpty Dumpty thing. But what I wanted to say, he mentioned Q College, and that is where I just recently completed the Q class for, it was 4 sessions. I learned the 8 hand cues, and I learned the position for those represent your consonant, and then I learned the positions, the 4 different positions in order to represent the vowels. And I did that because my son, who is profoundly deaf and is a spoken language kiddo, sometimes he likes to have complex conversations with me, but he's tired of listening. So listening fatigue is a very real thing. And so this was something that we felt like as a family that we could do to support him. And he was agreeable to learn, mainly probably because he'd been around it for many years. So that is my information on Cued Speech. They do offer free classes for parents. There is a paid course as well. And then the National Cued Speech Association also offers a lot of support to parents as well to help them learn, and to early interventionists and professionals in the field so that they can support parents as well.
I can see you now. Oh, I don't see me now. Hello again. Okay. Fingerspelling. It is a form of sign language where individual letters of the word are spelled out. The Rochester method actually is a communication where you fingerspell every word. And so here's an example. Are you ready? A form of sign language in a sentence is fingerspelled. And the interpreter got lost. He said, I was just reading that sentence. So it's really hard because you're fingerspelling every word. And just to clarify, so when I'm signing, sometimes I can't think of a word, and I can't think of a sign for a word. I'll spell it, and oftentimes store names, restaurant names, those are fingerspelled. My name, like when I first introduce myself, I'll say my name is David, spell it, and then I'll show my name sign, which is DG. That's the standard way of learning American Sign Language, is learning through fingerspelling, and then you pick up signs along the way. Gestures is more like using body language. It's a little bit of American Sign Language and a little bit of home sign, but it includes a lot of body language. It's not based on any grammatical rules, but with children and adults, it's a form of communication. One example would be like, if you don't know the sign and you do this, it's a pretty good indication that you want something to drink. And this indicates like sleep. In American Sign Language, this is the sign for sleep. But if you show your head laying on like a pillow, that's more of a gesture. And if you rub your tummy like that, it's a gesture, but it shows that you're hungry, you want food. Waving at someone to come along. Any sort of like waving like that would be a gesture, but it's still a type of communication. Again, it's not based on any sort of rules. One example, when I was really young, I was a kid, my dad, who is deaf, I don't know, I was struggling with like communication with my parents or something. And I was doing this, like, it looked like I was like biting my finger, and my dad's like, what is he saying? And it took him a while, but they finally figured out that I was asking for a drink. I was gesturing that sign for drink. And so that later developed into American Sign Language, where I actually learned the sign for drink. So over time, and with repetition and explanation and just role modeling what the sign would be, my dad showed me again and again, and I learned the sign for drink. Okay, next.
Okay, so I have the opportunity here to talk about home signs, and I have limited experience with that. Is everything okay? Okay. So David and I are going to share this opportunity to talk about home signs. But one of the things that I wanted to let people know is that hearing parents of deaf and hard of hearing children often communicate with gestures only understood within the family unit. Home signs are a gestural communication system, and it's usually created by the child who is deaf or hard of hearing. That child has limited language, or maybe they're pre-language, either visual or spoken, and they create their own signs and gestures to communicate and be understood by those around them. So my son, these are some pictures of him. And then I wanted to show that these were his gestures, and kind of a home sign is the way that we learn to view it. My son has sensory processing disorder in addition to being deaf. And one of the things was he only wanted us to show affection with him on his terms. So it was only when he wanted it. If we came by and touched him unexpectedly, he really didn't like that. So we had to learn to read what I call in ABC parent coaching land, which is attachment biobehavioral parent coaching, which is a service that we offer here at Beginnings, is it's really about being in tune with your child's signal. Not being able to communicate clearly with someone or being misunderstood repeatedly due to limited language is very traumatic. And so what I hope that parents learn tonight is that it's very important as a hearing parent to really pay attention to your children's signals, home signs, gestures, cues that let you know what they need. This particular picture of him in the little pool, he was ready to get out of the pool, but what he really wanted before he got out of the pool was for me. He was pursing his little lips together and he leaned his head out like that. And what he really wanted from me was he wanted a big hug and a kiss and some affection. And you can see he's doing kind of the same thing there, a little bit younger. Picture of him with his little elephant Harry. And so we knew that he used that particular gesture, home sign, to get affection. He also had some things that were very distinct for, I need my space. And again, I just feel like, with that, it's very important that we put down our phones and our devices and that we learn what our children are communicating to us, because there are lots of ways that they communicate to us long before they ever have language. David, did you want to add?
Yes. As far as home signs go in my family, we did use quite a few. And like I said before, I'm third generation deaf, and father is second generation deaf. So my grandmother was first. She didn't have an education or anything. And so with her communication, she had 12 children. 6 were deaf and 6 were hearing. And so how they communicated was the use of home signs. I'll show a few examples that my dad taught me. This is one, is this meant work. That's not the sign for work, but that's what that's what they used. And this, like a big N kind of, that meant a long time. That was their home sign for a long time. And he would kind of like rub on his upper lip right this, like this, to show the sign for man, which is not the sign for man. And oftentimes you can include speech with it. This is this home sign that he used for wife. There's a lot of different like home signs that they use. My aunt's favorite one was this. She would kind of like point to her ear and like go out. That was her sign for fool. That was a neat one, I thought. But it was cool to see, my family use those home signs, because my grandmother, didn't receive the education, and so that's what they had to use, and that's how they communicated.
Thank you.
Next.
Okay, and so as I mentioned before, our child received a cochlear implant, and we pursued listening and spoken language for him. I do want to let you know, though, that we did use basic signs with him when he was, before he was implanted. Our teacher, the deaf, was awesome to support us in experimenting, I guess, with different, trying on. Let me say it that way. We tried on different communication opportunities with our child. But I like this graphic here of from hearingfirst.org, and really it gives a pretty good kind of path of, how you might come to pursue the opportunity of listening and spoken language. The first thing is you get that hearing screening at birth. You get a rescreen, and so that you have a comprehensive hearing test. You get that diagnosis of hearing loss, and you want to do that. Really, we want to follow those 1, 3, 6 principles of from the CDC. Those guidelines, they're very important. So you want to get your hearing screening by 1 month. You have a diagnosis by 3 months, by 6 months. You are enrolled in and amplified, if that's your choice, and you're enrolled in early intervention. So you want to study, though. You want to learn about all of your communication opportunities, and you really want to consider what are your goals, what do you want your outcomes to be for your baby. And that varies from family to family, and that is fine. And again, I do want to say very clearly that, you can do more than one. You can choose to focus on one and then progress monitor. You can change course completely if you're not happy with the progress your child's making. You can also, split your time between spoken language and visual language. You just have to have the proper tools to do that. So, but anyway, so more about, spoken language. So with listening and spoken language, this is not an auditory oral program. It is an auditory verbal program, which means that, hearing devices are extremely important. You want to wear your hearing devices or have your baby wear their hearing devices. They like to say eyes open, ears on. You want to enroll in specifically listening and spoken language early intervention, which means that, you really want to be working with someone on your early intervention team who is well-versed in listening and spoken language. You want to keep your hearing devices on and fitted properly. Hearing devices that are providing a lot of feedback or are not programmed properly. Now we have digital hearing aids and we have these cochlear implants, but if they're not programmed properly, then your child is not going to get the full benefit. And then you want to use the strategies, and those strategies are fun. It's talking and singing and playing and reading every day with your baby. When we talked about, kind of what our opportunities were, one of the things that really struck me was they talked about that this is a lifestyle. And I actually find that to be true for all of the communication opportunities. It's a lifestyle. It's something you embrace and you do. You have fun, you love your baby. So I wanted to show you a few things here. So Max, in this little right here, this is actually, I should have put these together, but I didn't. I apologize to y'all for that. But he was about 18 months at this point, and his cochlear implant hearing age was about 6 months. And we were actually kind of chilling out at the dinner table. And he had started pointing to his ear because we didn't have his cochlear implant on. Oops. But we didn't have it on. And so he was pointing to his ear, and he was feeling, I guess, left out of the conversation or whatever was happening at the table. He was letting us know that he could not hear us. He had been very, part of listening and spoken language is drawing attention to the auditory input. So he was drawing attention that he had none. And then just a bit later, we put his cochlear implant on. You can see it on his right ear there. He's pointing to his ear. He's kind of giggling and laughing, and we're continuing on with dinner. No parent's perfect, and I have never claimed to be. So yes, there were times that my child did not wear his device. At 22 months, his hearing age was about 7 months. And what we discovered at my mother's house that October was he loves music and he loves musical instruments. And so that's a picture of my sister actually holding his processor in her hand, while he's wearing the earpiece, and he is just banging away at the piano and enjoying the sounds. So we're going to fast forward just a few years to show you at him at age 12. He's at a summer camp. And I wanted to share with you just a little brief video of Max's use of listening and spoken language. So he learned to listen first. And then as he learned to listen, he learned to associate sounds with the objects. And then he learned to speak.
Hi, I'm Max Kelly, and I'm from Bethany United Methodist Church. One thing I learned this week at Passport is honestly basically just what the last guy said, that some actions mean the world to people. Like, I don't know, when you're working on someone's house, we basically, the whole week we were working on this one house, and yeah, sure, it was just painting, just like doing things around the house, but it meant the world for her because, to be honest.
So that's just a quick snippet. And the way that we, that we kind of helped him to use listening and spoken language is, one, we did embrace the strategies and principles. We did read to him daily. We did use the strategies of listening and spoken language as we talked and we sang and we played. And, we did, monitor closely the development of his language over time and tweak things where we needed to tweak. And part of what we did was also follow that auditory learning guide, which is a guide that was developed by Beth Walker-Wooten many, many, many years ago. And basically it helps to break down how children hearing children develop speech and language. So the next portion is about picture symbols, pictures, and photos. And so visual aids are great. They really help grow and reinforce all language. It's an opportunity for you to spend time with your child. And some of the ways that you can do that are to create experience books that you make with your child about different experiences that you have. So this was just a little drawing that I found on the internet, but it's basically, I mean, we can all look at that and tell it's probably a mommy, a daddy, and 3 kids, a little girl, I'm thinking, and 2 naughty little boys. But the thing about it is, so for us, we did make experience books. We would sometimes, like, we made muffins, and we would cut the box top of the muffin out, or the little face of the box, and glue it into the page, and we would write. The children would tell me all the steps that it took to make the muffins and those kinds of things. And but the funny thing about experience books is we still have them. They became really treasured, just like sort of a journal of our life. And my kids actually called it the Jolly Journal. One of the things about that is when people would come to our house, new people, guests, they could not leave without completing a page in the experience book with the children. And that was for my hearing child and for my child who has the hearing difference. So these things are just really good opportunities to spend that time with your child. And that's what our children need, is that time from us to devote to the development of language, whatever and however. So another thing is labeling items in your home. You know, a couch, you can label the couch. You can, now they have awesome ways in which you can print out labels that are in ASL. You can print out labels that are printed English. You can just, I mean, it's amazing. You use lots of pictures. Photo albums are great tools. Kids love to look at photo albums, and just spending time with your children. And then another thing that I wanted to mention here is augmentative alternative communication, or AAC. Sometimes I think that people think that this is just something that happens maybe when you hit school, but there really isn't any data out there that indicates that you can't use an AAC device earlier on in life. I think that one of the things that I've noticed lately about AAC is that they are, the mother or the father or the caregiver, can actually record themselves, say if they're using some of these picture symbols, maybe for close. They can record themselves signing the word close, speaking the word close. And what it does is it offers the opportunity for the child who is maybe struggling or is frustrated to have a way of communicating before those skills all come in. So the other thing that is very important to know is that it's not going to inhibit their ability to develop natural language. It is something to use. You know, I always think of it in terms of, I have some children who are language delayed in my caseload, and you know, this is something that we had talk over with their speech pathologist, and, you know, make some decisions about, is this something that, you know, you might be able to incorporate in your life just to support your child while your child is continuing to learn language, so that that frustration level of not being able to be understood is lessened. David, would you like to add anything to this? You don't have to.
No,
I just remember when we talked, David, you were talking about using pictures and stuff around the house and visual, you know, aids and things like that. So I didn't know.
Oh, yes, definitely. Yes.
Those in terms of ASL.
Right. I apologize. Yes, I do remember that.
No, that's okay. I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah, kids definitely benefit by, you know, seeing visually, definitely hard of hearing individuals for sure. And it helps when they make those connections with the labels. For example, if you have a cup, you show them the cup. You have a label, you finger spell it. The TV, for example, that's a good one to put a label on. Doors around the house, you know, you can just spell out the English word, maybe have a sign American Sign Language sign and show them the sign. It's very important for them to make that connection as kids grow up, just so they can clearly understand, the English word for certain things and the sign language for certain things. So it's important to use definitely English as well as American Sign Language. That helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Signed exact English or signed English. It is not considered an actual language. It is just a signed system that follows the English word order or English language, and they pretty much sign every word. And they'll add endings like ing or ed to really show, what exact English word is being used. And I have a video that shows that. This is she's reading from a book.
Time to read a book. The name of the book is Me. Me. I am drinking. I am eating. I am laughing. I am crying. I am talking. I am listening. I am yawning. I am sleeping. Finished.
So it's different than American Sign Language. English signs are very different. It's definitely word for word. Most deaf people use American Sign Language because to me, I feel like it's smoother, and I prefer it for sure. And like I said, it depends on who I'm talking with, and speaking with other deaf individuals. I use American Sign Language. Now, I grew up mainstreamed in a public school and elementary school. I learned SE. I learned signed exact English. So that's what I signed growing up and in school. But once I got home, I used American Sign Language with my family because they're deaf. My mom is an interpreter. So she signed ASL, and my dad, of course, did. We didn't use SEE or signed exact English at home. I used American Sign Language at home. So that learning signed exact English, though, really did help me to learn the English written language, just learning the articles and the endings of words. I was born deaf, so I used American Sign Language. So that's really what I learned to begin with. But signed exact English helped me to learn to read English. Next.
Time.
There we go. So this past weekend, I met with I had a conference that I was attending, but I also met a lovely man, Ronald, who works with Relay 711, and he uses speech reading. And I had hoped so much to have a moment just to be able to video him and let him talk about how speech reading impacts him. Unfortunately, I always think I can do more than I can. So I want to talk to you about speech reading or lip reading. It's a building block. It's not a language. It's a building block that helps a child with hearing loss understand speech. So there's some tips and tricks to that. So for one thing, this is my husband in the picture here. I have to say, this is Dad and Max. We went to ride Thomas the Tank Engine up in Tweetsie Railroad, and Max has his hearing aids, bilateral hearing aids, and he is about 1 month in his hearing age with his hearing aids. So he's still a pretty little fella, 6 months old. And Max also had some mobility issues and some balance issues as growing up. So he's not quite as sturdy as other 6 months old. But anyway, so we kind of had to cradle him a good bit so that he could keep his balance and so forth. But anyway, so as you can see here, though, that Max is staring intently at his dad as his dad is speaking to him. And so one of the things that you really want to make sure of is that you are providing an opportunity for your child to look directly at the speaker's face while they're speaking. Your child is going to watch the movements of the mouth and face. You need to be in a well-lit room in order for the child to visually access the speaker's face. And in very good conditions, about 40% of the sounds in the English language can actually be seen on our lips. But it is not a standalone strategy at all. I want to emphasize that. It's a building block. It's used with other strategies such as auditory training or cued speech. And I think that what I read was that with speech reading, a person might understand, say you have a sentence of about 12 words, the person may be able to really speech read about 8 words of the 12. So that is something to remember. I know that sometimes hearing folks will assume that people get all their people who are deaf are able to access all of their information through speech reading. But that is just not true. I see David shaking his head over there. Yes. So David, would you like to add on or speak to this?
Yes. Yeah. It's like you said, the 40%, is all basically that you could catch. And then that's, if someone speaks very clearly. I mean, there's oftentimes people with mustaches, you can't even see their lips, or they mumble, or they just don't move their mouth as much as others, or somebody like over exaggerates. So some people, really do. They're over the top. But I do not understand lip reading. I don't get it. People, have tried, and I don't get it. Sometimes the hair can block their face, like I said, the mustache, or they mumble, or there are numerous reasons why it's difficult to lip read. The olive juice. We know what olive juice is, right? If you read it on someone's lips, what they say olive juice, it looks like I love you. And so there's those kind of mistakes that can be made. It's very confusing in that way. So it's not 100% for sure.
Well, that could be very awkward too.
Yes, definitely.
Thanks, David.
Okay. Tactile or object. This is a sign and communication method that's used by deaf-blind individuals. I've seen it. I have at my church, I have a deaf-blind member. This was back in the 90s, okay. But my mom interpreted, and she sat right in front of this individual and interpreted, and they put their hands on her signs, and she would have to switch to another interpreter. They went back and forth. That was for our church service. But deafblind individuals definitely can learn American Sign Language as well. And it's, like I said, tactile, so it's based on touch. And there are certain rules and movements that they can learn and understand and are able to communicate. And this is a really cool video that'll give an example of that.
David, could I just add here? I didn't even know I was doing this, but so when my son was a little baby, a little fella, but he had started to have language, spoken language. And when we would lay down at night and turn the lights down and everything, you know, and he didn't have visual access anymore to my lips, and he was, you know, taking his implant off to go to sleep, he would ask me to sign into his hand. So, you know, I would sign into his hand, just basic signs of, you know, things that maybe we had done during the day or whatever, you know, and that kind of thing. And definitely not a full language of ASL at all use, but that was a very comforting thing for my child to be able to, he would ask me questions and I could sign his answers as long as they weren't too open-ended. And I apologize, I just had to add that in there. And because I want parents to know, you know, how important it is for our children to feel connected with us. We as humans are denied or designed, I should say, not denied, but we are designed to be connected with one another. And so all of these things come into play in a wonderful way for our children. And I'm going to play this video now before I talk too much.
Oscar Serna is speaking in a brand new language. Oscar is both deaf and blind, or deaf-blind. He works at Gallaudet University on a project tracking the evolution of a language for those who can't see or hear. This new language is called Protactile ASL. The ASL stands for American Sign Language, which uses visual signs for words and phrases. Protactile ASL communicates entirely through touch. For example, here's a sentence in ASL. Here's how Oscar would say the same sentence in protactile ASL. Historically, deafblind people communicated through American Sign Language, Braille, and fingerspelling, where each letter of each word is signed into a person's hand. Helen Keller, maybe the world's most famous deafblind person, used fingerspelling. But those are limiting, especially when deafblind people want to talk to each other. Protactile ASL emerged in the early 2000s as once isolated deafblind people began to form communities. Deafblind people have been adapting American Sign Language and adding gestures for things many languages don't have words for. For example, this tap on the hand is like nodding. The language has been evolving ever since.
Now, what's new in Protactile is that we're seeing things that were used in visual sign language be transitioned from the use of space to the use of the perceiver's body.
Traditional theories of language defined it as something seen or heard, but Protactile ASL proves that language can also be communicated through touch. And for the people speaking it, it allows for a life with richer communication.
Since I became Protactile, all of the channels have opened up. Information flows freely. It's like going from dial-up to broadband.
So that's really cool. The use of Braille, definitely I've seen deafblind individuals use that. They can use, you know, not just Braille, but they can actually like feel the object and sell what it is, you know, laptops and cups and that sort of thing to make the connection. Remote controls or phones or, like I said, cups, just anything like that. Chairs, they, you know, oftentimes deafblind individuals will feel around on what, you know, what that object feels like. So to make that connection. Okay, next.
Oscar.
Okay. So we're coming to the end now of our presentation. And David and I wanted to share with you that you really do have so many opportunities for communicating with your child and to give them the language that they need. That's your most important job right now, is to love them and care for them And what comes out of that love is for you to really consider all of your opportunities and determine how you can proceed. It's up to you. And what we want you to know is that you are not alone. You'll learn and understand about different communication opportunities and what supports you need to reach your family's language and communication goals. So who do you talk to when you're not sure? And that is something that comes into play, because I know as a mom who is hearing, I was not sure about anything. And I had a very bad habit of trying to fake it till I make it. Don't want to do that. We want to feel very confident. And I would like for David, if you don't mind, if you could speak to the role, maybe that the service coordinator and how they can assist and their availability.
I'm a family trainer, but I work with coordinators who are much more responsible in the getting information, resources, and medical needs met, and communication with doctors. And that's more of like a medical focus, and they deal with more like paperwork. I focus on assisting and helping families who may not understand the audiology process and that sort of thing. Plus, as a family trainer, I step in and help and explain more just like general knowledge and having deaf children.
So the big thing there is, so sometimes if you don't understand, please reach out to your service coordinator. If you're not sure, if you can reach out to them at any time, whenever you have questions or don't understand. You can also reach out to them to say, hey, you know what? I think that this, I want to talk about my child's progress. And I'm thinking that maybe I would like to consider a different communication opportunity. I would like to learn more about it. You can let them know, let your service coordinator know your learning style, so that when you have your family trainer come, that they're going to be prepared to provide you materials and information in the way that you can best receive it. And then the other thing is, your beginning South Carolina parent educator specialist is here to help you process what you're feeling, because there are feelings that come with this as a parent. We're here to help you seek and to learn and to empower you to advocate for your child from diagnosis to age 22. And then the last thing we wanted you to know, changing the plan, adding to the plan. Yes, you can. You need to make decisions based on knowledge and desired outcomes and progress monitoring. You learn from your early intervention service providers, and you live your life filled with the joy of providing your child language and the ability to communicate effectively with you, your friends, your family, and the community. You can do it. So I guess right now we'll open it up to questions, David, unless you had something that you'd like to add.
I just want to say it takes time, so definitely be patient with all the opportunities and options that are out there. Like we've already said, you don't have to pick one. Pick several. Just be open, be patient. Again, we're here to help and help you understand the process. I know it can be a little anxious for you, but we can explain what things may look like or what you may experience. So if you have any questions, definitely let us know.
Yes. And just to speak to that patience and the learning, get out of your comfort zone. It's okay to get out there and meet deaf people who use ASL, deaf people who they rely on cued speech, deaf folks who use listening and spoken language, deaf folks who use a combination of all of these, deaf folks who use C. That was on my mission when my son was a baby. It's part of the reason I started a support group for parents in Charlotte was so that I could get connected with, first of all, the parents, and then find out what they wanted as well. And it come to find out what we really wanted to do was meet successful adults and learn from them, from all the communication opportunities that were present. So we hope that you can do the same. And of course, I know that I'm sure that your family trainer can facilitate that. And Jocelyn Ross, she can facilitate that as well through South Carolina Hands and Voices. And certainly Beginning South Carolina is happy to facilitate that as well.